I watched a fascinating documentary on HBO Max. It was about six of 12 kids in a family in Colorado who had schizophrenia. And it was a four-part series, and it led me to ask some questions. Very tough history. These people, I think they had been born between the 1960s and into the 80s, and six, well, 10 of the kids were boys, and two of them were girls. The last two that were born were girls, and at least one of those two girls had been sexually molested by at least one of the oldest brothers. And it also turned out that all of those brothers that had been um, had faced a schizophrenic condition had been molested by a priest in their childhood. And the girl that really was featured in telling the story was, oh, she was so powerful. It was amazing. She went back and she spoke about the sexual um, molested encounters that she had from the age that she thought had gone back to about 3 years of age up in into her teens. And then she finally told her mother about it, and her mother was not um, shocked. I think she was a little bit dismissive. And as it turned out, her mother had also been molested by a stepbrother or stepfather in her childhood years ago. So, it was such a fascinating um, story. I thought it was really told with a lot of dignity and courage. And if you or have family members that are dealing with severe mental illness, I think it would be very provocative to watch that on HBO Max. And I think it just came out recently, or at least I heard about it recently from some therapist friends of mine. And it led me to look a little bit deeper as to what severe mental illness, just what kind of demographics there are on it. So let me tell you, I used AI to do some searches, and I found out that young adults aged 18 to 25 years of age experience the highest prevalence of severe mental illness, SMI, and those percentages are 11.4%. 18 to 25 years of age have the highest prevalence of SMI at 11.4% compared to 7.1% for the adults aged 26 through 49 and 2.5% for those older than 50 years of age. So the gender disparities are very interesting because they're showing that women have about 7% versus males 4%. So it's radically higher in women than in men, as opposed to what it happened in this video where they were all boys. I mean, 6 of 12 kids all had that were boys, 10 boys in all, and anyway, it was very disheartening, but it was very fascinating to me how they even went back and talked to some psychiatrists and some people trying to find out what the origin of schizophrenia was, and obviously this was um, a great control group to go in and try to find out what was going on to lead to this. And so I also learned that there are also racial differences. And for example, Asian adults in the US have the lowest percentage, 2.8%, have um, significant mental illness. And then if you're part of a multiracial demographic, you have a very high um, percentage, 8.2% of individuals with um, a diversity in their race is associated with SMI. And then, but American Indians had the highest percentage at 9.3%. I thought that was pretty fascinating because American Indians, and I have some American Indian blood, and I found that was very fascinating. And and I've also done some research, interviewed some clinical psychologists and psychiatrists that have worked with American Indians and at a tribal level and also at an individual level, dealing with both individual issues as well as the overall group issues within a tribe. And I found that fascinating because, you know, that was a demographic here that was pre-existing to I say our, like I'm a part of this, you know, the conquering, you know, group of people, but you know, I do trace part of my blood back to the daughters of the American Revolution. So I do have some ancestors that came over on some of the first ships, you know, to colonize the United States. But then I also have some American Indian blood, and thus a very interesting connection as I've you know, worked with myself over time to try to tune into what was going on inside of some of the conflicts that I was dealing with. But what I found fascinating is that the American Indians were very contemplative, although, you know, they were, you know, they hunted and were very, I think from what I can tell, there were many of those tribes were very much at peace with nature and a very accepting, um, you know, group of people with nature. And then, of course, when they were you know, conquered and you know, essentially, you know, moved into reservations, and by the white man that came in to colonize the United States, um, it blew their mind. And I'm jumping to a practical conclusion here that, you know, a lot of the problems that are encountered by people is related to traumas that they've encountered, whether it's sexual or, you know, somehow at a deeper, at the deepest level, which I think the American Indian had to deal with, was a totally different way of life that they were being rather forced to adjust to, and that resulted in much higher levels of what we call in the United States today mental illness. So, and you can also see that these demographics, the statistics that the AI turned up for me, were that the West and Midwest regions of the US report the highest degrees of mental illness. 24% and 23% of the adults experience some sort of mental illness in 2021, respectively. The West also leads in SMI prevalence at 6.1%, in contrast to the Northeast, which shows the lowest SMI prevalence of 4.6%. So you find a higher degree of mental illness in the West versus the Northeast. And then the southern states also have some pretty high numbers. In Texas, in particular, that says 62% of those with mental illnesses are not being treated. So let me just repeat that. In Texas, there's an estimate that 60% of the adults with mental illness are not receiving any treatment. So I also found that there were some cities listed in these AI results that had some pretty interesting, I didn't realize this, but in Texas, since I'm coming to you from Austin, I thought it would be fascinating to see a little bit more about what the mental illness landscape looked like in Texas. And it said, several major cities across the U.S. have been identified as having particularly high prevalent rates of poor mental health and inadequate access to care. Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin in Texas, along with Jacksonville, Tampa, Orlando, and Miami in Florida, consistently rank among the worst cities for mental health. Dallas, in particular, stands out as having significant barriers to accessing mental health services, with a high percentage of adults with mental illness who are uninsured, 21.4%, and youth with depression who do not receive mental health services. 75% of youth with depression do not receive mental health services in Dallas. So, that led me to wonder about the data collection on all this. How much, who wakes up? If you've been watching the channel, I'm pretty open with some of the things I've run into in my life, and I think there is some gold in the cracks, if you work with it and stick with it, but it's not easy. And it takes some willpower and discipline, and perhaps even you have to have, some fate or, divine, the wind needs to be blowing your way to survive some of the things that I've had the good fortune to survive. But collecting reliable mental health data, it faces significant obstacles, including, the AI says, stigma, limited healthcare access, and varying diagnostic practices across regions. These challenges are particularly acute in less developed areas and amongst minority populations, leading to potentially underreporting and inaccurate prevalence of estimates. Efforts to improve data quality include the Global Burden of Disease Study, which uses meta-analysis to pool data from various sources and implementation of standardized diagnostic tools like DSM and ICD. Additionally, initiatives by organizations such as the National Institute of Mental Health are focusing on improving representation of minorities in mental health studies and developing culturally competent care to address disparities in data collection and treatment access. So what does all this mean? Well, coming back to one of the common theme here is dealing with trauma and how you respond to it. And, no one goes, well, I shouldn't say no one, because I'm sure there's people that, deliberately put themselves in harm's way and may actually be intending to harm themselves. And, I'm not a doctor, a physician, or a trained counselor or licensed therapist. And if you are feeling like you want to harm yourself, call 911, get some help from a professional, and they can help you or reach out to a family member or a friend, someone that you trust and feel safe with. But when I'm seeing some trends in here are, with people that are dealing with issues around sexual abuse, maybe some drug abuse, and maybe some early childhood development issues that have to find some resources. And really, these numbers are very distressing, as was that HBO Max documentary that I'm talking about. The amount of resources that are available are out there, but they're not real easy to find. Put some comments on the page here, and because there are a lot of resources that I've learned about, and I'd like to make those more available to others. And I know that there's a large community that can help each other. But one of the challenges is raising your hand and being identified as someone that's having to deal with any of these things. It can affect how your friends view you, how you view yourself, how you make a living, and how you're accepted or not accepted in certain groups. So there's obviously some challenges out there for us to get the word out, to help each other, and to hold each other's hands and help people, survive this to the point where you can thrive and actually enjoy some of the heightened benefits that may lie out there as you work through these issues that really bring some enrichment to your life. I'm going to leave it right there. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe and keep watching for more content. Share this with others that might benefit from this type of candid and raw comments. Thanks.